Join ForumIAS Academy, trusted by hundreds of toppers, including IAS Rank 1 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐥 Sharma.
Hello and welcome to ForumIAS. Today is 15th August 2023 and these are all the articles that we are going to discuss today. The first article is about the Aditya L1 mission. Now we have seen that Chandrayaan 3 was launched in the month of July, and a couple of days back we also had a discussion about Chandrayaan 3 mission. Now we are going to discuss about the Aditya L1 mission, and this mission studies the sun. It is expected to be launched in August end or September. Now we'll go into the article. So the Aditya L1 mission is being launched by ISRO, obviously. Aditya L1 is the first Indian space mission to observe the sun and the solar corona. Corona is the outermost layer of the sun. So to speak, it is not a constituent layer of the sun. So if this is sun, the immediate area surrounding the sun is called as the sun's corona. So this Aditya L1 mission will observe the sun and the solar corona. And this mission, why is it called Aditya L1? Because the mission will be launched to the L1 orbit. What is this L1 orbit? We'll see. L1 means Lagrangian point. So Lagrangian point can be for any three bodies. So in this case, we have the sun. We have the, let this be the sun. Then we have the earth. And now we have the satellite, which is the Aditya. So there are three bodies. In any three bodies, we can find these Lagrangian points. Okay. And for these three bodies, sun, a satellite and earth, for these three bodies, there are 5 Lagrangian points. And this particular Aditya L1 mission is going to be launched to the L1 orbit, which means there is a Lagrangian point L1 and the orbit passes through this Lagrangian point. Why this Lagrangian point is chosen? Because Aditya L1 can look at the sun continuously. There won't be any eclipses. There won't be any part of the year wherein this Aditya will not be able to see the sun. That is why this L1 point has been chosen. And in this mission, there are 7 payloads. Out of that, the primary payload is the Visible Emission Line Coronagraph, VELC. So this VELC was designed and fabricated by the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, Bengaluru. Other 6 payloads are designed by ISRO and other institutions. The main payload VELC, what is its function? VELC payload will be able to observe the corona continuously, and the data provided by it is expected to answer many outstanding problems in the field of solar astronomy. So that is the purpose. The VELC, the name itself has coronagraph, which means this payload, that is the VELC, will look at the corona, will observe the corona continuously. And another speciality of this Aditya L1 mission is that it can image the sun as close to 1.05 times the solar radius. So that means this particular mission can image the sun in a very good resolution. It can also do imaging, spectroscopy, polarimetry at the same time. This is a unique feature. In most of the astrophysical missions, either imaging or spectroscopy or polarimetry can be performed. But this Aditya mission is an advanced mission in which imaging, spectroscopy and polarimetry can be performed at the same time. And this particular Aditya L1 can take observations at a very high resolution. That is a very good level of detailing and many times in a single second. So this Aditya is the second space-based astronomy mission after AstroSat. AstroSat was a satellite that was launched for space research. And this Aditya L1 would be launched with the help of PSLV, that is the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Okay, so we already studied in Chandrayaan 3 that Chandrayaan 3 was launched with the help of LVM-3, Launch Vehicle Mark 3. So for Aditya mission, PSLV will be used. In statement-based questions, these statements can confuse you, right? Because back to back we have had two important missions. So you should know the difference. In Chandrayaan, a different launch vehicle was used. In Aditya, a different launch vehicle was used. This mission, Aditya L1, will study the sun's corona, photosphere, chromosphere, solar emissions, solar winds and flares, coronal mass ejection. We will see what are these. These are all the layers of the sun. We will see in the next slide. Already we saw something about the Lagrange points. So we already said that it is concerned with the three body problem. That is, there is sun, earth and the satellite. Okay. So this Lagrange point is a point in space wherein the enhanced regions of attraction and repulsion. So what happens is, this particular body is affected by the sun's gravity as well as the earth's gravity. And this body is also revolving around the sun, which means it will be subjected to centripetal force. Centripetal force. So one beauty here is that the gravitational force with respect to sun is acting inwards and the centripetal force is acting outwards. So these two forces are getting balanced and this Aditya satellite will remain in that Lagrangian point. That is the importance of a Lagrangian point, and especially for L1 we have seen that it can look at the sun. If a satellite is at L1 orbit, it can look at the sun continuously. L1 point is about 1.5 million kilometer from Earth, and we already saw that there are 5 Lagrangian points. And what is the beauty of Lagrangian point is that fuel consumption required to remain in position will reduce, because we have two forces which are acting opposite to each other. So this particular satellite will remain in this orbit, in this L1 orbit itself, because simultaneously two equal and opposite forces are acting on this satellite. So the fuel that is required to make this satellite remain in this orbit will be less, because we have two natural forces which are equal and opposite to each other acting on this satellite. And we already saw that at L1 point there is no eclipse and the sun can be viewed continuously. As promised earlier, here we have the layers of the sun. Our Aditya L1 mission focuses on the outer layers of the sun. So we will see that here we have the photosphere. Then the next layer is chromosphere and the outer layer is corona. An important feature here is, look at this chromosphere. The temperature is 4000 Kelvin to 8000 Kelvin. But in corona, the temperature is 500,000 Kelvin to 1 lakh Kelvin. So this shows that there is a type of temperature inversion. Temperature inversion is there between the chromosphere and the corona. Chromosphere is a part of the sun, but corona is the outer area surrounding the sun. But still corona is much hotter than the chromosphere. This is one kind of anomaly. and this can also be asked in MCQs, in statement based questions. So that is why you have to be aware of these things. The second article comes from the opinion section of the newspaper. It is authored by none other than Shashi Tharoor, who is a third term MP of Lok Sabha. Now, let us discuss about the origins of democracy. Why are we discussing about the origins of democracy? It is because of the Prime Minister's statement in the eve of the G20 summit that he called India the mother of democracy. But it is said that democracy's origins can be traced back to Greece. But why would PM give out such a statement calling India to be the mother of democracy? It is because there are some evidences in the ancient Indian period about the flourishing democracy. And even during the Buddhist period, that is after the period of Mahajanapadas, we have evidences of flourishing democracies. We'll see about that, and this would be a kind of refresher on the topics that we studied in ancient India. There are some allusions to democratic forms of government in the Rig Veda. Many sacred texts mention something that is similar to popular government. What is a popular government? It has certain features like it strives for equitable resource distribution, amicable discussion is taking place in that society, and there is amicable resolution of disputes. These are some of the markers of a popular government. And Rigveda also has mentioned about Gramini. Gramini is the village head employed by the king. And this Gramini has civilian and military duties. And there are references about institutions like Sabha, Samiti, etc. in the Atharva Veda. And these Sabhas, Samitis, they perform primarily judicial functions. They will hear a case and they will adjudicate a particular case. Then we have Dr. Ambedkar's arguments. He said that more pronounced versions of democratic practices flourished in the Buddhist era. And this is an era that is contemporary to the Greek city-states and their republics. So we can say that democracy might not originally been from Greece. Rather, it evolved at the same time in different parts of the world, because the Buddhist era was contemporary period to the Greek city-states. The same time when democracy developed in its nascent form in Greece, it also developed in its nascent form in India also, in the Buddhist Sanghas and Ganas. Ambedkar had argued that constitutional roots of Indian republicanism runs deep. This is what he is referring to. It is as ancient as India itself. That is what he is claiming. Some Indian states were even republics, like the Licchavis, who ruled the northern Bihar and Nepal in the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, that is around Buddha's time. And Buddha himself was from a republic only. Mallas, which is centered in the city of Kushinagara, which is in present day UP, Vajji Confederation, based in the city of Vaishali. So these are some of the republics, some of the Mahajanapadas who were republics. What are republics? The nations or states which have an elected head of state rather than hereditary monarch. So there were Mahajanapadas where this kind of republicanism prevailed. Also, the independent Gana Sanghas also give evidence about the presence of republicanism. And for that we have a very beautiful evidence that is in the form of the Vinaya Pitaka, and it is a Theravada Buddhist scripture. In this Vinaya Pitaka, it talks about the rules and regulations to be followed in Buddhist monasteries and what are all the rules and regulations that has to be followed by the Buddhist monks. Okay, so this particular Vinaya Pitaka regulated the meetings of the bhikkhus, that is the monks. And what were the rules for debates, motions, voting through secret ballot system in their sanghas? So that is why we say that the very good evidence of republicanism is Gana Sanghas. Okay. Today also in Lok Sabha, in state legislatures, we have rules for debates, motions, voting through secret ballot. All these things are there in modern day democracy, and that can be traced back to the Vinaya Pitaka, and which is a very good evidence. And these democratic republics like the Lichavis, the Mallas, the Vajjis, they had Rajas, and these Rajas, they headed the assembly that met to regularly discuss the major state decisions. And these Gana Sanghas, that is the assemblies, they had financial, administrative and judicial authority. Today, our Lok Sabha also has financial authority in terms of voting on the budget, administrative authority because it votes on bills, and judicial authority when it investigates the wrongdoings of constitutional post holders like president, UPSC chairman, etc. Similarly, during those times also, the republics of Lichavis, Mallas, Vajji, etc., they had these Gana Sanghas, and these Gana Sanghas had financial, administrative and judicial authority, and they also elected the Raja. So the Raja is also not a traditional Raja in that he is a hereditary monarch. The Raja himself was elected by the Gana Sanghas. So this shows the democratic roots of India. So the Prime Minister is very much right in claiming that India is a mother of democracy. And this Raja reported to the assembly in some states, and he was assisted by council of other nobles. Like we have the Prime Minister responsible to the Lok Sabha, and he is assisted by a council of ministers. Similar institutions, crude form of modern institutions, were found during the Buddhist era, especially in the Mahajanapada period, in the Gana Sanghas. So, India's democratic traditions, India's republican traditions run very deep. They are from ancient India period itself. And we also had the concept of village administration. And Gandhi also spoke about self-governing village republics. So, we have the Kautilya's Arthashastra, which gives a comprehensive account of the system of village administration. And these village administration practices, the evidences are found in the Mauryan dynasty as well as the Chola dynasties. And Gandhiji was also inspired by this, and he also advocated the village self-administration. But Dr. Ambedkar was somewhat skeptical of this village self-governing nature, because he called villages to be cesspools of caste oppression, social and economic backwardness. From a Dalit point of view, Indian village was a sink of localism, den of ignorance, narrow-mindedness and communalism. So, Dr. Ambedkar taught that the villages were very backward and they were dens of casteist oppression. So, the village administration system might not exactly represent ideal democracy. In these village administrative practices, many sections of society were kept out. That is, for example, women were not a part of decision-making process, and the Dalits were not part of the decision-making process. This shows that the ancient village administrative systems were not as inclusive. If we draw parallel to the Greece form of democracy, there were restricted category of male citizens. Only they had the right to participate in the Greek democracy. Women were avoided. There were certain class of people called as the barbarians in Greece. They were also not included in these democratic practices. So there is a perfect parallel that can be drawn between ancient village administration and ancient Greek democracy. So now we have a very inclusive democracy, and that is a gift we have given to ourselves. but we must protect it because this gift is a very precious gift that can be snatched away. So we have to be vigilant about our democratic status, and it should be as inclusive and as democratic and as last mile reaching as possible. Okay. Now let us move to the third article. The third article talks about privilege motion. We will see what is this privilege motion. So first we have to understand what is parliamentary privilege. Privilege motion is moved when there is a breach of that parliamentary privilege. What is parliamentary privilege? These are certain rights that are conferred to the members of parliament for conducting business of the parliament. But there is no codification of the exact parliamentary privileges, but the basic tenet of what it means when it comes to parliamentary privilege is that it is prima facie the right of free expression in the course of parliamentary debates, and any member of parliament will not be liable for court proceedings for this. That is, the lawmakers should be able to speak their mind in the floor of the house. Then only constructive discussions can happen, and no lawmaker can be prosecuted for this in any court of law. That is a parliamentary privilege. That is, when this privilege has been breached, a privilege motion can be raised by any member. Now we have understood what is parliamentary privilege and when does parliamentary privilege motion come into play. Whenever a member feels that this parliamentary privilege is breached, that particular member can move a privilege motion, and it can be admitted by the chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Then he will refer it to the privileges committee. This privileges committee itself is formed by the chairman. He only nominates the members to such committee, and this privileges committee has 10 members, and the chairperson of this privilege committee is also appointed by the Rajya Sabha chairman. But there are two conditions which restrict the scope of privilege motion. That is, the question that is raised through the privilege motion shall be restricted to a specific matter of recent occurrence. This recent occurrence clause is very important. You can't motion a privilege or breach of privilege now for something that happened 3 years ago, right? It should be concerning a matter of recent occurrence, one, and second, and the matter requires the intervention of the council. Only if it satisfies these two conditions, a privilege motion is considered to be legitimate. And similar provisions are there for Lok Sabha as well, and there the speaker will have the power to make such decisions. So, for a privilege motion, the speaker of the Lok Sabha, when it comes to Lok Sabha, and the Rajya Sabha chairperson is the first level of scrutiny. So, the speaker or the chair, they can decide on the privilege motion by themselves without referring it to the privilege committee, or they can refer it to the privilege committee also. So, this is about the privilege motion. What you should know, it is for breach of privileges. Privilege means it is the right to free speech in the floor of the house, and privilege motion is admissible only for cases of recent occurrence. These are all the important points that you need to know. Okay. Moving to the fourth article, it is about SEBI proposing a new process for delisting of companies. What is delisting? First of all, what is listing? There is a company, and that company gets listed on the stock exchange. How does a company get listed on the stock exchange? So you must be aware of the company called as IRCTC. It is through which we book the tickets, right? A few years back, IRCTC got listed on the stock exchange, which means an initial public offer was made. Initial public offer was made. Initial public offer, that is IPO, and through this IPO, the public and institutional investors can buy the shares of this IRCTC. So what it means when a company gets listed in a stock exchange, that means the shares of that company are not just held by the promoters of the company, the shares of that company are also held by the general public. That is the crude or very simplistic explanation of what it means by listing of a company. Delisting is just the opposite. In listing, what happens? Public buy the shares of a company. In delisting, the promoters buy the shares from the public and they will be moved off the stock exchange. That means their shares are no longer traded in the stock exchange. That is delisting. And there are various methods of delisting. So what happens in listing? We have to understand. Again, we have to go back to listing. In listing, there is something called as book building. What is book building is that the public, they want to buy the shares of IRCTC. Okay, and they will bid for the shares. They will bid for the shares. And they will say, for example, person A is there and the person A is saying, I want 100 share. Okay, and each share must be 90 rupees. I am ready to offer 90 rupees. Then there is person B who says that I want 150 shares and I will pay rupees 80 for each share. Person C says that I want 200 shares and I will pay 95 for each share. So this is very profitable for the company. That will raise the value of the company. So whoever is the highest bidder will get the allotment of the share. This is the simple explanation of bidding. But how the share gets allotted, it is a lot more complicated. But for UPSC purpose, just understand what is this bidding. So now bidding happens in the IPO, that is during the listing. In delisting, what happens? The reverse book building. We had book building in the listing. Okay, listing, in that we had the book building. In delisting, we have reverse book building. Reverse book building. In book building, what happened? The public bids for the share. Bids for the share of this company. Now, in reverse book building, the company bids for the share of the shareholders. That is the public. The company bids for the shares of the shares held by the general public. If the company is giving a higher value for these shares, the shareholders, that is the public, will sell these shares back to the company. That happens in the reverse book building process. But SEBI has done a consultation paper and the SEBI says that instead of doing this kind of reverse bidding, so in listing what happened? Bidding happened. Bidding happened. In delisting, reverse bidding happens. Right? The company is buying the share and the company has to offer a lot more money to buy back that share from the shareholders. Instead, there can be a fixed price mechanism. Instead of going through this reverse bidding, there can be a fixed price mechanism wherein delisting happens through a fixed price mechanism instead of the existing reverse book building process, which I explained already. That is, currently, the delisting process of a company from stock exchanges involves a reverse book building process whereby shareholders of the company place offers to sell their securities back to the promoters or large shareholders. So, the reverse book building happens. The shareholders place offers here. It is up to the company to accept or reject that offer. The company, most of the times, the company has to give as much price as they can. So, I already explained how the book building happens. We have 3 offers for buying the shares, right? Similarly, I will give an example for reverse book building. So say there is a person A, or let us go for another example. Okay, so we have person P. Okay, and this person is ready to sell 100 of his shares at rupees 100. Person Q is ready to sell 50 of his shares at rupees 105. Our person wants to sell 150 shares at the rate of rupees 102. So in this, for the company, the lowest price, the company will go with the lowest price, right? Most advantageous for them. Here, the company goes with the highest offer in the book building. In reverse book building, what happens? The same public, they will offer to sell their shares and the company chooses the least amount. That because in this case the company is paying the investor, the company is paying the shareholder. Okay, this much of detail or depth is not required for UPSC. I am just explaining for your understanding. If you are not understanding, you can rewind and see it, and even then if you don't get it, just forget it and move on, because it is not going to play a big role in the exam question paper. Okay, you just know that SEBI has shifted from this reverse book building to a fixed price mechanism. In this fixed price mechanism, there will be one fixed price. The company itself will say that we will buy at 50 rupees per share, and everyone has to sell the share to the company at the same 50 rupees. There is no other go. But this delisting mechanism would be permitted only for those companies whose shares are frequently traded. That means for big companies whose shares are frequently traded, whose shares are frequently bought and sold. Like for example, Tata, there is shares of the Hinduja group, there is shares of the ITC group, which are frequently bought and sold. For them, only this fixed price mechanism will be allowed. SEBI is considering this, and this has not yet been implemented. Okay, so what is the takeaway from this article is that in case of SEBI, we are saying that whenever a company is getting delisted from the stock exchange, earlier there was a reverse book building. Now instead of that, we are going to a fixed price. In reverse book building, a reverse bidding happens. In case of fixed price, a fixed price is there and the shareholders have to sell their shares at this fixed price back to the company. That's all. Simple explanation. We'll move on to the last article. The last article talks about air pollution, which is making the antimicrobial resistance worse. What is antimicrobial resistance? Antimicrobial resistance, when disease-causing bacteria become immune to the drugs that could once destroy them. So there is a bacteria, it fights. So whenever our body gets ill, there is bacteria in our body. Let us assume that it is a bacterial disease. So there is bacteria in our body and we take antibiotic. Antibiotic will fight the bacteria. Bacteria will also fight the antibiotic. They will fight with each other to find the winner. If the antibiotic wins, the bacteria is destroyed. But in this process, what happens? The bacteria learns from its past mistakes and it develops mechanisms to better fight this antibiotic. That is antimicrobial resistance. This article says that particulate matter, we would have studied in the environment portion, this particulate matter are very small particles, very microscopic particles in air, that is dust particles. PM 2.5 is their size. It could drive the world's next public health threat. That means this PM 2.5 is making worse the problem of antimicrobial resistance. Why is it that? We'll see. Even if there is 10% rise in air pollution, there is an increase in antimicrobial resistance by 1.1%, which is very huge. there is a very good correlation between increasing air pollution and increasing AMR. So it is said that this antimicrobial resistance is a pandemic in waiting. Why this antimicrobial resistance is increasing? Because we are using the antibiotics injudiciously. Today also you go to a medical shop and you buy an antibiotic, you are easily given, and we take antibiotics even for smallest of inconveniences. That is injudicious use of antibiotics. Poor sanitation facilities, high burden of disease. Already we have high burden of disease in our country. That is why people are taking antibiotics in the first place. Poor public health infrastructure. That is why people are going to medical shops to buy these drugs instead of going to a doctor or a hospital. So these are the causes of antimicrobial resistance. But this article is not fully about antimicrobial resistance. We have studied about antimicrobial resistance in detail in our previous discussions. But I have told you about the gist of what is antimicrobial resistance. That is when bacteria becomes more powerful than the drug which was meant to fight it. Okay, that is the simple explanation. Now we should see how does this PM 2.5 increase the effects of antimicrobial resistance. So what happens is ARGs. What are these ARGs? Antibiotic resistance genes, that is ARGs. What happens? They are emitted from hospitals, livestock farms, because even livestock, cattle or chickens, they are given antibiotics. Okay, so this ARGs, antibiotic resistant genes, they are emitted from hospitals, livestock farms, and they could latch on to the pollutant particle, that is the PM 2.5 particle. And such particles have been found to contain diverse antibiotic resistant bacteria and antibiotic resistant genes which are transferred between environments and directly inhaled by humans. Okay, PM 2.5 can also get into bloodstream, and if there is an antimicrobe resistant bacteria or an antibiotic resistant gene in that PM 2.5 particle, that particle along with this antibiotic resistant bacteria will go into your bloodstream. Even without consuming any kind of antibiotics, you could be susceptible to antimicrobial resistance. So this is a ticking time bomb. That is why it is said that it is a pandemic in waiting, because we have breached that limit wherein we could reverse back on it. What can be done in this regard? In 2017, India released National Action Plan to address AMR. But the problem is that the states, they have not yet designed a region-specific framework to address the local factors which cause AMR. Say in a state there is huge particulate matter pollution. They should have local strategies to control that particulate matter pollution, right? And we can take an example from China's playbook. What China did was, in the 2010s, China implemented restrictions on antibiotic sales, air pollution on a war footing. So within 7 years, air pollution declined as much as it had in the US in 3 decades. That fast China controlled their air pollution problem. Ultimately, the country reaped gains against the twin challenges of PM 2.5, that is air pollution and AMR. So similar kind of strict measures are required in India, because antimicrobial resistance is a pandemic in waiting. Okay, so we are done with the articles. We will see some PYQs. In India, extended producer responsibility was introduced as an important feature in which of the following? A. Biomedical waste management rules, recycled plastic management rules, C. E-waste management rules, D. Food safety and standard regulations. This extended producer responsibility was first introduced in e-waste management rules. What does it mean? Say a manufacturer is selling a laptop and you are using that laptop for 5 to 7 years and you discard that laptop and it goes into landfill, that should not happen. Instead, the manufacturer should have a mechanism to collect back that laptop and dispose it safely. That is extended producer responsibility. Next question. In the context of any country, which one of the following would be considered as part of its social capital? A. The proportion of literates in the population. B. The stock of its buildings, other infrastructure and machines. C. The size of population in working age group. D. The level of mutual trust and harmony in the society. D is the social capital. It provides the base for other kind of capital. Stock of buildings is infrastructural capital. Size of population in a working group is a human resource capital, that is human capital. Proportion of literates is also human resource capital. The level of mutual trust and harmony in the society is only the social capital. Okay, that's it for today's discussion. Follow us on all these social media platforms. Happy Independence Day. This is Indumati signing off. Thank you and all the best.